In the vast sun-bleached expanse of the Sonoran Desert, where the horizon shimmers and the heat warps the air, stands a monument to forgotten power. It does not rise like a palace or sprawl like a traditional hacienda. Instead, it seems to grow from the arid earth itself, a geometric anomaly of earth-toned concrete and sharp angles that mimics the surrounding mesas. This is not a home built for comfort or beauty, but a fortress designed for silence and control, now claimed by a deeper, more permanent silence. From a distance, it is nearly invisible, its low-slung profile and coarse texture a deliberate camouflage against the ochre and brown of the desert. There are no grand entrances, no ornate balconies, only monolithic walls, thick and windowless, that seem to absorb the relentless sunlight without reflection. The structure was conceived to be unseen, a secret kept by the landscape itself. Today, its only observers are the circling hawks and the distant bored soldiers who guard a ghost. Up close, the decay is palpable. The wind, its only constant inhabitant, whispers through unseen cracks in the concrete, carrying fine grains of sand that scour the surfaces like time itself. A fine layer of dust coats everything, muting its already subdued colors and softening its hard edges. The air is heavy with the scent of baked stone and dry rot, the perfume of abandonment. This is a place where a great machine has ground to a halt, its gears frozen by rust and neglect. The perimeter fence, once an electrified barrier monitored by thermal cameras, now sags in places, its warnings of lethal force made hollow by time. The unmarked private road leading to it is slowly being reclaimed by hardy desert flora. What was once the nerve center of a continental enterprise is now just a scar on the land, a piece of evidence in a case long since closed, yet whose consequences still ripple outwards. This structure was built not to welcome, but to repel. Its architecture is a language of paranoia and function. Every line speaks of defense, every wall a testament to a deep-seated fear. The few panes of glass are thick, layered, and opaque, designed to withstand a direct assault. They reflect nothing but the empty sky, turning the gaze of any intruder back upon themselves. The fortress was designed to be a black hole, pulling in power and letting no light escape. Inside, the silence is even more profound. The main doors, thick slabs of reinforced steel, stand ajar, pried open by a force greater than any they were designed to resist. They open into corridors that feel more like subterranean tunnels than hallways, where the air is cool and still. The echo of a single footstep travels far, a lonely sound in a space built for the quiet, methodical hum of an empire at work. The materials are cold and impersonal, exposed concrete, brushed steel, dark stone floors. There is no trace of domesticity, no hint of the personal tastes of the man who commanded from within these walls. This was a workspace, a command center, a bunker. Every room was designed for a purpose, every square foot an instrument of a singular, overarching will. Its emptiness now feels less like absence and more like a void. One can almost feel the phantom vibrations of its past. The phantom hum of generators in its self-sufficient core, the phantom crackle of encrypted communications from its subterranean command post, the phantom weight of secrets stored in vaults buried deep beneath the desert floor. The house was a living organism, a complex machine of logistics and terror, and its ghost still lingers in the oppressive stillness. It was a place of immense, invisible power, a hub from which fleets of aircraft were dispatched and tons of contraband moved across continents. From a soundproofed room buried beneath tons of earth and concrete, decisions were made that altered economies, corrupted governments, and ended countless lives. The sheer scale of the operation it housed is difficult to comprehend, a reality that seems impossible within these now hollow chambers. This fortress was the physical manifestation of a mind that craved anonymity over fame, efficiency over opulence, and absolute control over everything. It was the ultimate expression of a power that did not need to be seen to be felt. The structure itself was the primary symbol, a brutalist masterpiece of paranoia that mirrored the man who built it. He sought to become a ghost, and he built himself a tomb to rule from. Now, it serves as a training ground for the very soldiers who would have once been tasked with assaulting it. They practice breaching its impenetrable doors and clearing its labyrinthine corridors, fighting a phantom enemy in the shell of his fallen kingdom. The fortress, once a symbol of defiance against the state, has been absorbed by it. Its purpose inverted into a tool for the very power it was designed to subvert. The walls do not speak, but they hold the memory of everything. They are a silent witness to the rise of a corporate criminal titan and the slow, inevitable decay of his works. They absorb the whispers of strategy, the cold calculus of profit and loss, and the chilling finality of betrayal. The story of the man who built this place is etched into its very foundations, but what the house concealed beneath the desert floor was a secret far deeper than concrete and steel. Luxury was just the surface. What happened inside, few dared to know, and even fewer survived to tell. To understand the ghost who haunts these ruins, we must unearth the origins of his ambition. If you wish to uncover the secrets buried within these walls, subscribe to see the story of the man who commanded the skies from the darkness below. To understand the fortress, one must first understand the ghost who conceived it. He was not born into the mythology of borderland bandits or the legends of revolutionary heroes. His name was Amado Carrillo Fuentes, and his apprenticeship in the business of organized crime was served not on the streets, but in the quiet, calculating shadows of his uncle, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, one of the godfathers of the Guadalajara cartel. He learned from the inside, a silent observer watching a flamboyant empire built on a foundation of visibility. He witnessed firsthand the fatal flaw in the old guard's design. Their power was loud, their wealth was cinematic, and their faces were known. This visibility, this need to be seen as kings, became their undoing. When the Guadalajara cartel collapsed under the weight of its own hubris, following the murder of a DEA agent, Carrillo absorbed a lesson that would define his entire existence. True power does not need an audience. It needs only to be effective. The fall of his predecessors created a vacuum, a chaotic scramble for the fractured pieces of a once monolithic enterprise. The borderlands erupted in a symphony of violence as new warlords fought for territory, each seeking to replicate the old model of brutal public dominance. The Arellano Felix brothers in Tijuana, the Gulf Cartel to the east, they all battled for the throne. But Amado Carrillo Fuentes had no interest in the throne. He wanted to own the kingdom itself. He saw what others did not. The true commodity was not the product, but its journey. The real power lay not with the producers in the south or the distributors in the north, but with the one who controlled the corridor between them. He envisioned a logistical network of unparalleled scale and efficiency, a corporation of the sky that would render all ground-based squabbles obsolete. He would not be a drug lord. He would be a CEO. This was the birth of the Juarez cartel, a criminal enterprise structured less like a gang and more like a multinational conglomerate. Carrillo's vision was cold, corporate, and terrifyingly modern. He began acquiring a fleet of decommissioned commercial aircraft, Boeing 727s, transforming them into ghost ships that could move tons of cocaine in a single flight, bypassing the petty checkpoints and desert patrols that preoccupied his rivals. His nickname, the Lord of the Skies, was a rare concession to public identity, but it described a function, not a man. The man himself remained an enigma. He cultivated an aura of deliberate obscurity, operating through layers of intermediaries, encrypted communications, and a disciplined code of silence. While others built gilded palaces to broadcast their success, Carrillo understood that such structures were targets, monuments to vulnerability. His ambition required a different kind of architecture, one born from his core psychological tenets, methodical paranoia, and absolute control. He needed a headquarters that was not a home, a command center that was not a palace. It had to be a physical extension of his own mind, impersonal, efficient, and impenetrable. It had to be a place from which an empire could be run without leaving a single trace of the man running it. The Sonoran Desert was chosen for its emptiness, a vast, sun-scorched canvas that offered the one luxury he truly craved, invisibility. The harsh terrain was a natural fortress, its miles of open visibility a deterrent to any uninvited approach. Here, in the heart of nothing, he could build his everything, a structure that would repel the eye, swallow sound, and project power without ever revealing its source. The architectural style was a deliberate and stark rejection of narco aesthetics. There would be no marble columns, no exotic menageries, no sprawling haciendas with lush gardens. He commissioned a design rooted in brutalism, a philosophy of raw, unadorned function. Reinforced concrete, tinted to match the ochre earth, would be its skin. Its form would be low, angular, and aggressive, designed to be mistaken for a feature of the landscape or a forgotten military installation. This was not a house designed for living. It was a machine designed for operating. Its luxury would be hidden, subterranean, and functional. An underground communications hub to coordinate his air fleet, a clandestine hangar connected to a secret runway, and vaults not just for cash, but for the information that was his true currency, the secrets of politicians, generals, and judges who were on his payroll. The decision to build the Fortress of Silence was the moment Amado Carrillo Fuentes began to physically construct his own anonymity. Every blueprint was a declaration of his philosophy. Every security feature, the layered glass, the reinforced steel doors, the self-sufficient power and water systems, was a manifestation of a deep-seated paranoia that he had weaponized into a strategic asset. The construction itself was a massive, clandestine operation, a way to launder millions in cash, while simultaneously testing the loyalty and competence of his inner circle. The men who poured the concrete and installed the encrypted wiring were vetted, watched, and bound by a pact of silence that was absolute. The fortress rose from the desert floor as a secret kept by a select few. It was more than a building. It was the physical embodiment of a new paradigm in organized crime, a power that did not need to shout its name from the rooftops because it owned the sky above them, a power that understood that a monument to ego is a tomb in waiting, but a fortress of silence is a throne for a ghost. Each wall that went up was another layer of separation between Amado Carrillo Fuentes and the world. He was not creating a sanctuary to retreat to, but an engine room from which to command. He was building the very heart of his invisible empire, a place where his presence could be felt across a continent, even as the man himself began to systematically disappear. The structure was a paradox, a colossal monument to the idea of being unseen. It was a declaration that the greatest power is the one you never see coming, wielded by a man you cannot find. The fortress was not the result of his success. It was the primary tool he would use to achieve it. As the concrete cured under the relentless desert sun, so too did his resolve. He would become a phantom, a whisper in the corridors of power, a logistical force as abstract and undeniable as gravity. The fortress was his covenant, a promise made in steel and stone that he would control the world by first erasing himself from it. The rise of the Juarez cartel was not marked by bloody street battles or public declarations of war. It was marked by the methodical pouring of concrete under the searing Sonoran sun. The foundation of the fortress was laid at the same time as the foundation of the new cocaine superhighway, a parallel construction of steel and ambition. Each enterprise was designed to support the other, one a hidden empire of logistics, the other its physical, unbreachable heart. The choice of brutalism was a statement of intent. It was an architecture of power, not of comfort, of function, not of beauty. The raw, unfinished concrete surfaces were a rejection of the gilded aesthetic favored by his rivals. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was not building a monument to wealth. He was forging a weapon, and its stark, aggressive lines were the first indication of its purpose. The fortress was designed to intimidate, not through opulence, but through the sheer, unadorned fact of its existence. As his fleet of Boeing 727s grew, so did the fortress. Its expansion was a direct mirror of the cartel's increasing market share. A new wing was not a residential addition, it was a new server bank. The excavation of a deeper level corresponded with the opening of a new route through Central America. The structure grew organically, a concrete organism feeding on a steady diet of illicit profit and strategic necessity, each new corridor a hardened artery in a continental network. From the outside, it was a study in anonymity. The earth-toned concrete absorbed the harsh desert light, its low profile designed to merge with the mesas on the horizon. There were no grand gates, no identifying marks, nothing to suggest the immense gravity of the power held within. It was a mask of utter banality, a deliberate void on the landscape designed to be overlooked, forgotten, or mistaken for a forgotten piece of military infrastructure. But behind the mask, the weapon was being sharpened. The interior was a labyrinth of cold, functional spaces. Brushed steel, dark stone, and exposed concrete were the only materials. The aesthetic was that of a corporate headquarters designed by a military strategist. Every room had a purpose. Every corridor led to a node of control. It was a space engineered for efficiency, where the human element felt like an intrusion. The true secret of the fortress, its most potent feature, lay beneath the desert floor. Construction of the subterranean levels was the project's most guarded secret, a feat of engineering and clandestine logistics. Ton by ton, the earth was removed and replaced with reinforced concrete, creating a hidden world immune to the chaos of the surface. This was where the real work of the empire would be done. The first level down was the brain, a state-of-the-art communications center, hermetically sealed and soundproofed, served as the global command post. From here, encrypted satellite links controlled the movement of aircraft from Colombia to the United States. Flight paths were monitored, bribes were authorized, and the entire logistical ballet was choreographed in the cool, humming silence of this electronic bunker. Below the brain was the memory, a series of bank-grade vaults, protected by layers of steel and seismic sensors, held the cartel's true assets. Here, there was cash, but it was the least valuable commodity. The real treasure was information. Parallel ledgers detailing payments to high-level officials, compromising recordings of politicians and generals, and blueprints for future operations. This was the Empire's hard drive, a vault of secrets that made the organization untouchable. The deepest level was the artery, a cavernous, climate-controlled hangar connected to a mile-long clandestine airstrip. The entrance was a masterpiece of concealment, a section of the desert floor that could retract to reveal the underworld below. Here, jets could land, be unloaded, and disappear without ever registering on a radar or being seen by a satellite. It was the physical link between the fortress and the sky it commanded. The airstrip itself was a thin, dark line drawn across the desert, invisible from any public road. Its surface was treated to minimize dust, its lighting systems designed to be visible only from a precise angle of approach. It was a private gateway to a global network, a piece of infrastructure that turned the vast, empty desert into the most valuable logistical hub in the hemisphere. The entire complex was designed for total autonomy. Its own deep-water wells, a bank of massive diesel generators, and a sophisticated air filtration system meant it could be sealed off from the outside world for months. This self-sufficiency was not just a security feature, it was a reflection of Carrillo's own psyche. He was building a world he could control absolutely, a kingdom with its own water, its own power, its own breathable air. This drive for control created a profound paradox. The fortress was one of the most expensive private construction projects in the country, a venture that consumed hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet all this capital was invested in the idea of being unseen. It was a monument built to deny its own existence, a testament to a power so vast it no longer required acknowledgement. The structure was never a home. There were Spartan living quarters, but they felt temporary, like accommodations in a military barracks or an oil rig. There were no signs of family, no personal art, no objects of comfort. The few pieces of furniture were severe and functional. The fortress was an instrument, and those inside it were merely its operators. It was in the subterranean conference room that the true nature of the fortress revealed itself. The room was a perfect cube, soundproofed and shielded from any form of electronic eavesdropping. Here, alliances were forged with Colombian suppliers, and rival Mexican plazas were brought into the Federation. It was a sterile chamber where deals worth billions were made with quiet handshakes, and betrayals were settled with cold logical precision. Deeper within the complex was another, more specialized chamber, known only to the inner circle. It was a windowless room with a polished concrete floor that sloped gently toward a central drain. This was the place for internal audits, where loyalty was tested and failures were accounted for. It was a stark reminder that the corporate efficiency of the cartel was underwritten by a foundation of absolute, silent violence. The fortress began to take on a life of its own. Its concrete walls seemed to absorb the secrets whispered in its corridors. The constant hum of its ventilation systems became the sound of a sleeping beast, its network of fiber-optic cables like a nervous system carrying signals of profit and death. The house was no longer just a building. It was a complicit entity, a silent partner in the enterprise it housed. With the final installation of the perimeter's thermal imaging cameras, the fortress was complete. It stood as the ultimate expression of Amado Carrillo Fuentes' philosophy. It was a weapon disguised as a feature of the landscape, a corporate headquarters masquerading as a void. From its silent, climate-controlled core, he could touch any part of the continent. He had achieved a new form of power, one that was logistical, corporate, and terrifyingly impersonal. The fortress was its temple, a place where the mechanics of a criminal empire were refined into a science. The Lord of the Skies now had his throne, not a chair of gold, but an entire ecosystem of control buried beneath the earth. The luxury here was not in what could be seen, but in what could be controlled. The air itself, drawn from the dusty, scorching desert, was filtered into something cool, clean, and perfectly regulated. It was an invisible assertion of dominance over the natural world, a manufactured environment where every variable was accounted for. This absolute command over his own atmosphere was perhaps the purest expression of his ambition. The structure had become a perfect reflection of the man, impenetrable, self-contained, and observing the world from a position of detached, absolute control. But as the fortress sealed him inside, it also began to seal him off. What began as a tool for engaging with the world was slowly becoming a barrier against it. What then is the ultimate symbol of such a man's vanity? Is it the hidden hangar, a private gateway to the world? Is it the vault of secrets, holding the keys to political power? Or is it something as simple and profound as the air he breathes, engineered to be perfect in a fortress built to be invisible? Let us know in the comments what you believe best represents the ego of a ghost. At the zenith of his power, Amado Carrillo Fuentes had ceased to be a man and had become a system. The Fortress of Silence was the system's central processing unit, a place where the chaos of a continental drug war was distilled into the cool, quiet hum of logistics. The sun would beat down on the silent concrete shell, giving no indication of the immense invisible industry churning within. The rain was not a spectacle of violence, but a masterpiece of corporate efficiency, managed from the sterile heart of the desert. Inside, the days were measured not by the sun, but by the ceaseless flow of encrypted data. The fortress was alive with a silent, electronic pulse. In the subterranean command center, a small vetted crew of technicians monitored the ghost fleet. On a bank of screens, green dots representing Boeing 727s moved across the dark maps of the Americas, each one a payload of compressed wealth. Their progress was tracked, their flight paths adjusted in real time to avoid detection, their landings coordinated with a precision that rivaled any commercial airline. This was the source of the empire's lifeblood, cocaine from the south, dollars from the north. But the fortress was not merely a dispatch center, it was the crucible where raw product was transmuted into legitimate, usable power. The river of cash that flowed back from the United States was too vast and too dirty to be simply stored. It had to be cleaned, integrated, and made to disappear into the legitimate economy. This process, the alchemy of money laundering, was orchestrated from these same soundproofed rooms. A network of currency exchange houses along the border acted as the first filter, transforming mountains of small denomination bills into manageable financial instruments. Instructions would be sent from the fortress, dictating transfer amounts and destinations with the detached language of a stock trader. From there, the funds would leapfrog through dozens of shell corporations. Freight companies, agricultural exporters, resort developers, each transaction a layer of insulating fiction. The construction of luxury hotels in Cancun and sprawling cattle ranches in Chihuahua was not a diversification of assets. It was the final stage of the laundering cycle. The fortress itself had been one such project, a machine for washing money that, once complete, became the machine that managed the washing. The empire's profits were poured back into the very fabric of the national economy, weaving the illicit into the legitimate, until the two were indistinguishable. This financial architecture was buttressed by an even more critical structure, a wall of political protection. The true power of the fortress lay not in its concrete, but in the contents of its deepest vault. Here, beneath layers of steel and seismic sensors, were the ledgers that detailed a parallel government. The names of governors, police commanders, and federal judges were listed next to dates and payment amounts. These were not records of bribes, they were certificates of ownership. The most prized asset in this vault was the file on the nation's own anti-drug czar, a high-ranking general who had been placed on the cartel's payroll. His complicity guaranteed that the state's efforts to combat trafficking would be directed at Carrillo's rivals, effectively using the military as a tool to consolidate his monopoly. From his desert bunker, the Lord of the Skies could deploy the very forces meant to destroy him, a checkmate move in a game played far above the law. The fortress, therefore, became a sovereign entity, a state within a state with its own foreign policy and its own system of justice. Alliances were managed from the subterranean conference room, a sterile cube of polished concrete and steel. Here, emissaries from the Cali cartel would arrive via the clandestine airstrip, emerging from the desert floor into a world of climate-controlled silence, to negotiate shipping rates and delivery schedules as if they were executives from different divisions of the same conglomerate. The atmosphere within these walls was one of profound, almost monastic discipline. There were no lavish, hedonistic parties that defined the narco culture of the era. Gatherings at the fortress were strategic, not social. Businessmen and politicians would be flown in, their presence a quiet testament to their allegiance. Deals were sealed not with boisterous toasts, but with the subtle nod of understanding in a room shielded from any listening device on Earth. Luxury was present, but it was the luxury of absolute control, not of decadent display. It was in the flawless filtration of the air, the perfect temperature of the water drawn from deep aquifers, the silent glide of reinforced steel doors. It was the ability to create a perfect, self-sustaining world, a bubble of order and predictability, immune to the violent chaos the empire itself unleashed upon the world outside. This was the true opulence of Amado Carrillo Fuentes. This engineered perfection extended to every aspect of the operation. The fortress housed a small, permanent staff of loyalists, technicians, pilots, and security personnel, many of them ex-military. They lived in Spartan but comfortable quarters, their lives governed by a strict code of conduct. They were the silent cogs in the great machine, their loyalty ensured by immense reward and the unspoken threat of absolute consequence. The fortress was a place of immense, silent power, but it was also a place of profound paranoia. The very systems designed to ensure security also bred suspicion. Every communication was encrypted, every corridor monitored, every staff member subject to constant subtle vetting. The perfection of the system demanded the assumption of its potential betrayal at every moment. The master of the house was also its first and most watched prisoner. This paranoia was given its starkest expression in a specific, windowless chamber deep within the subterranean levels. Known only as the negotiation room, its polished concrete floor sloped imperceptibly toward a central drain. This was the cartel's internal affairs department, a place where loyalty was audited and liabilities were liquidated. It was the bloody engine room that kept the clean, corporate facade running smoothly. Here, the cold logic of the empire was laid bare. Betrayal was not a matter of passion, but a breach of contract. An informant, a skimming lieutenant, or a security risk would be brought into the silent, sterile room for a final accounting. There were no trials, only audits. The room's purpose was a chilling reminder that within this perfect system, human beings were the most unreliable components, to be serviced or replaced as needed. The fortress had become a psychological bunker as much as a physical one. It was an environment that mirrored and amplified its creator's mind, detached, methodical, and utterly isolated. From his command center, Amado Carrillo could see the world, touch any part of his vast network, and move billions of dollars with a single command. Yet the world could not see him. He had achieved a God's-eye view at the cost of his own human presence. He had become a ghost in his own life, his existence confirmed only by the vast and disruptive effects he had on the world. His name was a whisper, his face a fading memory. He moved between his various safe houses, but the fortress was his true home, the only place that fully embodied his philosophy. It was the one place where the man and the system he created were one and the same. The reign of the Lord of the Skies was absolute. His federation of cartels controlled the primary arteries of the drug trade. His network of corruption had neutralized the state. His financial empire was seamlessly integrated into the legitimate economy. From the outside, the system appeared flawless, a self-perpetuating machine of immense power and profitability, all managed from an invisible point in the desert. The fortress stood as a monument to this achievement, a testament to a new kind of criminal mastermind, one who prized anonymity over infamy, logistics over brutality, and silence over spectacle. It was a perfect machine of control, designed for an untouchable king ruling from an invisible throne. The sheer scale of its success seemed to place it beyond the reach of any conventional force. Inside its walls, the air was still and cool, recycled and pure. The silence was broken only by the hum of servers and the soft click of keyboards. It was the sound of an empire at its peak, a closed loop of power so complete, so self-contained, that it felt eternal. The Lord of the Skies, insulated by layers of concrete, technology and fear, believed himself to be infallible. He controlled the roots, the politicians, the money, and the information. He had built a world with no windows, a kingdom where he was the sole architect of reality. The fortress was the ultimate expression of this worldview, a place where every variable was managed and every threat seemingly neutralized. It was a perfect, hermetically sealed world. But a system built on absolute control has no tolerance for imperfection. A fortress designed to keep the world out also prevents anything from escaping. The same walls that guaranteed his power were slowly becoming the architecture of his confinement, a gilded cage built by his own methodical paranoia. The flawless mechanism was, by its very nature, brittle. For any perfect closed system, the first breach is always catastrophic. It does not arrive as a frontal assault, but as a subtle change in pressure, an unexpected variable that the machine was not designed to compute. For the fortress of silence, this breach came not through its reinforced walls, but through a single, compromised human component operating in the outside world. The system's greatest asset had become its most profound vulnerability. In February of 1997, the news broke like a fissure across the polished stone floors of the command center. General Jesus Gutierrez Rebollo, the nation's anti-drug czar and the keystone of Amado Carrillo Fuentes' architecture of impunity, had been arrested. The report, delivered through an encrypted channel, was cold and factual, yet it landed with the force of a seismic shock. The state, which had been a subsidiary of the cartel, had just declared its independence. The general was not just an ally, he was the master key, the one piece that unlocked every level of institutional protection. His arrest was more than the loss of a powerful associate. It was the erasure of the buffer zone between the fortress and the world, the sudden, blinding exposure of the entire enterprise to the harsh light of genuine scrutiny. The ghost had lost his most important shield. Inside the desert bunker, the immediate aftermath was not chaos, but a deepening of the silence. The rhythmic hum of the air filtration system suddenly seemed labored. The cool, recycled air felt heavy, thick with an unspoken question. Who had betrayed the general? Or more terrifyingly, who had betrayed them to the general's captors? The fortress, designed to repel external threats, was suddenly faced with the specter of internal decay. The methodical paranoia that had been a strategic tool now began to curdle into a corrosive obsession. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, a man who saw the world as a series of assets and liabilities, now viewed his own inner circle through that same cold calculus. Every loyal lieutenant became a potential informant, every silence a possible conspiracy. The fortress's own surveillance systems, once directed outward, were retasked to watch the watchers. This internal corrosion was soon matched by external failures. A Boeing 727, a ghost ship on a routine run, vanished from the monitors in the command center. It had not crashed due to weather or mechanical failure. It had been intercepted over the Gulf of Mexico, guided into a military airfield by American fighter jets. The cargo, 10 tons of Colombian cocaine, was seized in a clean, bloodless operation that spoke of perfect intelligence. The loss of a single shipment was a manageable cost of business, but the nature of the interception was a terrifying omen. The Americans were no longer guessing at routes. They were reading the flight plan. The encrypted communications, once thought to be an impenetrable shield, had been pierced. The electronic ghost that moved through the fortress's fiber-optic nervous system was no longer alone. From his subterranean world, Carrillo felt the net tightening. The DEA, once a distant adversary, now felt like a constant invisible presence. He began to see their hand everywhere, in the sudden nervousness of a political contact, in the unexplained disruption of a money laundering channel, in the static that now seemed to hiss beneath the surface of his secure phone lines. The fortress of silence began to change its function. What was once a command center, a place from which to project power outward, was slowly transforming into a shelter, a place to hide from a world that was rapidly becoming hostile. The master of the global network found himself increasingly confined to his own creation, his world shrinking to the dimensions of his concrete bunker. He retreated deeper, spending more of his time in the subterranean levels, as if the sheer mass of earth and concrete above him could somehow block out the encroaching reality. The command center, once a place of detached, godlike observation, became a room of anxious vigilance. The green dots on the map, once symbols of flowing profit, now seemed like vulnerable targets in an increasingly lethal game. The contrast between the fortress and the man inside it grew starker. The structure itself remained impassive, its monolithic concrete shell baking under the Sonoran sun, a perfect facade of invincibility. But inside the system was bleeding. The human components, the pilots, the financiers, the political contacts, were being picked off one by one. The corporate body was dying from 1,000 small cuts. The atmosphere among the small permanent staff began to sour. The quiet discipline that had defined the fortress's internal culture was replaced by a palpable tension. Eyes darted, conversations were clipped, and the unspoken fear of being the subject of the next internal audit hung in the sterile air. The machine was beginning to devour its own cogs. Even the architecture seemed to conspire in this decay. The long, windowless corridors, once symbols of secure, focused work, now felt like the passages of a tomb. The echo of a lone footstep on the stone floors sounded less like a mark of authority and more like a measure of profound and growing isolation. The negotiation room, with its polished floor and central drain, saw more activity, but its purpose had shifted. It was no longer a tool for managing external threats or corporate rivals. It became the final destination for those inside the organization who were deemed security risks, the place where the system's paranoia was given its most final and brutal expression. The pressure was building to an unsustainable level. The political shield was gone. The logistical network was compromised. The internal structure was fracturing under the weight of suspicion. The Lord of the Skies was being grounded, his kingdom of the air collapsing around him. The man who had built an empire on the principle of invisibility was now the most wanted phantom on the planet. He was a prisoner of the very fortress he had built to guarantee his freedom. Its impenetrable walls, designed to keep his enemies out, now served to lock him in with his own fears. The vast desert outside, once a symbol of his untouchable domain, was now a hostile territory patrolled by his hunters. In the sterile silence of his underground world, surrounded by the technological instruments of his immense power, Amado Carrillo Fuentes came to a final, logical conclusion. The system he had perfected was failing because its central component, his own identity, had become a liability. The fortress could no longer protect the man. Therefore, the man himself would have to cease to exist. A new plan began to form, a final desperate gambit born not of ambition, but of pure survival. It was a strategy more audacious than flying tons of cocaine across continents. He would erase himself from the world, surgically and permanently, and be reborn. The cracks in the fortress walls had finally reached its very core. The end did not come with a thunderous assault or a dramatic siege. It arrived as a clinical report from a hospital in Mexico City in the summer of 1997. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, was dead. The official cause was a complication during an extensive plastic surgery and liposuction procedure, a desperate final attempt to surgically erase the man and preserve the ghost. The news was met with a mixture of disbelief and strategic opportunism. An empire without its king is a body without a head, and the state, long held at bay by the spectre of his power, finally saw its moment to strike. The operation to seize the Fortress of Silence was launched under the pre-dawn sky. A fleet of military helicopters, black silhouettes against the indigo horizon, descended upon the Sonoran Desert. There was no warning, no preliminary firefight. They did not come to negotiate a surrender, they came to claim a ruin. The roar of their rotors was the first sound to break the fortress's engineered silence in years, a brutal intrusion of the outside world into a hermetically sealed kingdom. Special forces teams rappelled onto the flat roof, their movements swift and precise. Simultaneously, armored vehicles breached the sagging perimeter fence and raced down the private road, kicking up plumes of dust that hung in the still air. The front doors, slabs of reinforced steel designed to withstand a direct missile strike, were opened not with a key, but with shaped explosive charges that sent a concussive boom echoing through the empty landscape. The first agents to enter were met not with resistance but with a profound and unsettling stillness. The air inside was cool and stale, the artificial climate control system having finally given out. The only light came from the harsh beams of their tactical flashlights, cutting through the gloom and dancing across the cold surfaces of exposed concrete and brushed steel. The fortress had become a tomb. They moved methodically through the labyrinthine corridors, a disciplined invasion that mirrored the cold efficiency of the man who built the place. Their boots on the stone floors were a percussive alien sound in a space designed for whispers and the hum of electronics. They were not just clearing rooms. They were performing an autopsy on a dead empire, searching for its heart, its brain, its memory. The subterranean command center was their primary objective. They found it silent, the bank of monitors dark and lifeless. Keyboards were wiped clean, but the indentations on the leather chairs spoke of recent, constant use. A frantic attempt to scrub the system clean had been made, but the ghosts of data remained. Technicians began the slow, painstaking process of recovering the digital specters from the hard drives. Deeper they went, into the belly of the beast. The bank-grade vaults were breached, their thick steel doors scarred by thermal lances. Some were empty, their contents spirited away in the chaotic hours after the king's reported death. Others, however, had been abandoned in haste. They found ledgers, not of cash, but of corruption, their pages filled with the names of officials and the cold arithmetic of bribery. The fortress was being turned inside out. Its secrets, once its greatest source of power, were now being catalogued as evidence. Every document seized, every encrypted file recovered, was a brick removed from the wall of impunity that had protected the Juarez cartel. The invisible network was being dragged, piece by painstaking piece, into the unforgiving light of a federal investigation. In the hidden hangar, connected to the clandestine airstrip, they found nothing but the faint smell of jet fuel and tire marks on the concrete floor. The ghost fleet had already flown, its birds scattered to the winds. But the existence of the hangar itself was a monumental discovery, physical proof of a logistical capability that had, until now, been the stuff of legend and intelligence reports. The personal quarters were a study in contradiction. Spartan, almost monastic, they contained little of the man himself, but a search revealed a hidden compartment behind a wall panel, containing not weapons or cash, but a collection of architectural blueprints for properties across the continent and a series of forged passports, each with a different face, a different name. It was the escape kit of a man who had planned to become anyone, and in the end, became no one. The most chilling discovery was made in the windowless chamber known as the negotiation room. Under the cold, chemical glare of forensic lights, the polished concrete floor revealed its history. Luminol sprayed across the surface and around the central drain bloomed with the ghostly blue-white glow of old blood. The corporate facade of the empire was dissolved in that moment, exposing the brutal, violent machinery that kept it running. The fortress, once a symbol of untouchable sovereign power, was now a crime scene. Yellow tape was stretched across its monolithic doorways. Evidence markers dotted its floors. The structure that had been a state within a state was now just another asset to be seized, another line item in the case file against a dead man. Its power had been neutralized. The raid was not a battle but a dismantling. The agents were not soldiers fighting an enemy. They were archaeologists excavating a fallen civilization. They were sifting through the material remains of a power so vast and so secretive that its full extent could only be understood in its ruins. The fortress was no longer a weapon, it was an artifact. As the sun rose higher, casting the long shadow of the concrete shell across the desert, the scale of the operation became clear. What had been built in secret over years, a monument to paranoia and control, was unraveled in a matter of hours. The silence that returned to the fortress was different now, not the charged silence of command, but the empty, hollow silence of a place that had been abandoned by its purpose. The mystery of Amado Carrillo Fuentes' death lingered over the scene. Weeks later, the bodies of the 3 surgeons who had performed his final operation were found encased in concrete-filled barrels, their bodies showing signs of extreme torture. Had they failed him, or had they succeeded too well, becoming loose ends in a perfectly executed escape? The question hung in the air as heavy as the desert heat. Was this raid a final, definitive victory for the state, the capture of a dead king's castle? Or was it merely the methodical search of an empty shell, a decoy left behind by a ghost who had already slipped through their fingers, leaving his own tomb as the ultimate act of misdirection? The fortress now stood as a hollow monument, its purpose inverted. The very soldiers who once might have been tasked with assaulting it now stood guard over its emptiness. It was a concrete carcass picked clean, a testament to an empire that rose to command the skies only to be buried beneath the earth. But does true power lie in the concrete and steel that can be seized and catalogued, or is it something more intangible, something that survives the fall, a ghost that continues to haunt the system long after its fortress has been breached? If you believe the story of power is written in more than just stone, subscribe to our channel to explore other empires and their inevitable ruins. Today, the Fortress of Silence is a monument to an answered question. The desert, patient and persistent, has begun its slow work of reclamation. Hardy shrubs sprout from hairline cracks in the concrete, and the wind, its only constant tenant, carries the same fine grains of sand that once scoured a living empire, now polishing the surface of its tomb. The sun still beats down with the same indifferent intensity, but the heat no longer powers a machine of global logistics. It simply bakes the stone of a hollow shell, warming a void. The official record is clear, written in the ink of autopsy reports and sealed with the finality of a death certificate. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, is gone, his body laid to rest in a lavish mausoleum in the Sinaloan countryside. For the governments that hunted him, his confirmed death was the closing of a file, the end of a war against a phantom. The king was dead, his name etched on a tombstone, a tangible end to an intangible reign. Yet a story built in the shadows does not end cleanly in the light. The legend of the ghost persists, fueled by the gruesome fate of the surgeons who held his life and his face in their hands. Whispers endure in the border towns and intelligence backrooms that the body in the casket was merely the final act of misdirection, the ultimate cost of a successful escape. In death, as in life, Amado Carrillo Fuentes remains an enigma, a man who may have achieved his ultimate ambition, to vanish so completely that not even his own demise could be proven. His fortress, however, could not vanish. Seized by the state, it became an asset too toxic to liquidate and too symbolic to destroy. It languished for years in legal limbo, a concrete ghost on the government's books. No private buyer would dare touch it, and no public agency knew what to do with it. It became a permanent ward of the very military it was designed to subvert, a ruin guarded by the victors. The structure's purpose has been perfectly inverted. The same soldiers who once trained to assault its impenetrable walls now walk its perimeter, their patrols a quiet, constant reminder of the state's ultimate victory. They are guarding not a treasure or a secret, but a memory. The fortress, once a sovereign entity that challenged the nation, is now its most peculiar and silent possession. What was conceived as a feature of the landscape, a secret hidden in plain sight, is now a landmark of infamy, a scar. Its stark, brutalist lines no longer speak of hidden functional power. They now resemble the bleached, exposed ribs of a great beast that has fallen in the desert, its immense strength reduced to a skeletal curiosity for the hawks circling in the empty sky. The fall of the king did not bring peace to the kingdom. The corporate federation Amado Carrillo Fuentes had built through negotiation and intimidation fractured the moment he was gone. The power vacuum he left behind was not filled. It exploded. The ensuing war between his former lieutenants and ascendant rivals plunged the borderlands into a new era of chaotic, public violence that made the reign of the Lord of the Skies seem like a time of disciplined order. His true, unintended legacy was not the industrialization of trafficking, but the unleashing of the savagery that followed its collapse. He had been a lid on a boiling pot, and his removal unleashed a scalding torrent of bloodshed that continues to define the region. The cold, corporate peace he had engineered was revealed to be a fragile, temporary state, dependent entirely on the mind of its singular, invisible architect. We return, then, to the beginning, to the silence. The same wind whispers through the same unseen cracks. The same fine layer of dust settles on the same cold stone floors, but the silence is different now. It is not the charged, humming silence of a command center, but the deep, profound quiet of a place that has outlived its purpose. It is the silence of a story that has finally, irrevocably, ended. The walls, which once absorbed the phantom vibrations of a global enterprise, now absorb only the heat of the day and the chill of the night. They are the last witnesses, the keepers of a memory of a power that believed itself to be as enduring as the desert itself. Their slow decay is a testament to the ultimate truth of all empires, that nothing built of concrete and ambition is permanent. The man who built this place sought to become a ghost, a logistical force as abstract and undeniable as gravity. In death, or perhaps in disappearance, he succeeded. He is no longer a man but a myth, a spectre that haunts the violent narco culture that grew from his empire's ashes, a cautionary tale whispered on both sides of the law. The fortress was the ultimate instrument of this ambition, a machine designed to make a man untouchable. But its ruin stands as a final stark lesson. The concrete was breached, the vaults were opened, the systems were dismantled. The material evidence of power, no matter how imposing, is always vulnerable. It can be seized, catalogued, and left to crumble. Amado Carrillo Fuentes constructed a world without windows to gain a perfect view of the one outside, only to find himself trapped within his own creation. He traded his identity for absolute control, and in the end was left with neither. The fortress is the perfect monument to this transaction, an empty, echoing shell that proves a man once existed there only by highlighting the totality of his absence. The ruin of this fortress, then, poses a final, lingering question. Does the decay of a monument signify the failure of the man who built it? Or does the enduring mystery of his fate prove that the most successful empires are not the ones that leave behind towering structures, but those that leave behind only a ghost and a story that can never truly be concluded? If stories like this make you see power from a different angle, subscribe to follow other downfalls as astonishing as this one.